As we get started, I'd like to introduce you to today's presenter, Dave Basham, Management and Program Analyst in the Verification Division. Dave joined U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services in 2008 following his retirement from the U.S. Army. He has conducted over 500 Form I-9 and E-Verify presentations to nationwide audiences, including elected officials, immigration attorneys, compliance personnel to human resources and payroll professionals. Dave conducts ongoing sessions for associations that include Society of HR Management, American Payroll, and National Notary. In 2016, the American Payroll Association presented Dave with their annual APA Government Partner Award in recognition of his service as a government agent to the payroll community. In 2014, Dave was selected as the recipient of Arkansas's Society of Human Resources Management Friend of HR Award. Dave's military assignments were numerous in the infantry arena. His military service decorations include the Legion of Merit. Dave's originally from West Virginia, but now makes his home in historic Virginia. So now I'll turn it over to Dave Basham. Dave?
Hey, thanks a lot, Steve, and a quick shout out to AccuSource for having me back on. Seems like we've been doing these webinars in some form or fashion over the past couple years, and hey, I was glad to hear back from AccuSource saying, hey, Dave, let's go ahead and give a webinar on some of those top tips, both with the I-9 and E-Verify. So let's jump right into today's session. You see the agenda. I'm not going to talk about E-Verify from the foundation and up, okay? We're just going to give you a lot of the top tips. I'm going to use a lot of the slides that I've used in my current presentations, but we're going to hone in on some of those areas that you need to be aware of, or we see there's common mistakes, or we receive a lot of questions. We'll then jump into E-Verify's new look. We call it the modernization of E-Verify. It hasn't changed how E-Verify is running the case, but you're going to see how there's additional enhancements and some things you're going to see in its new look, and we'll look at that. And then we'll wind down with some resources. Then I'll turn it back over to Steve for some closing items to include your questions that you have sent in. So let's go ahead and jump right into the session. I like to start my session speaking about the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division's IER section, as you see here on the screen. The takeaway that you might want to jot down while I'm speaking about this specific slide is that phone number toward the bottom. Employers may also contact IER at 1-800-255-8155. As you see, the IER section, as I stated, are within the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, and they enforce those anti-discrimination provisions of the INA, the Immigration Nationality Act. Now, I know that's a mouthful, and you may be saying, Dave, what does that mean to me? I'm with the Verification Division of USCIS. And it's our division that is home to the I-9 and E-Verify. We make both the form, the program, the items that you see on our websites, the call centers, we handle all those questions, etc. But it's DOJ's IER section that handles any of those discrimination issues. Maybe employees call in regards to an employer discriminating against an employee, maybe as you complete the I-9 with them, or E-Verify. This slide and that phone number is basically from DOJ's IR section, their own slide deck. We do a lot of sessions with them. That number is their hotline number. Why did I ask you to jot the number down? If you feel heading into today's session, or maybe after today's session, you wonder, hey, are we treading on that gray area of discrimination on how we complete the I-9 and or E-Verify with our employee, or the guidance you give to the employee in regards to that process? You can pick up the phone, dial DOJ's IR section. When you dial that number, they have their attorneys and their investigators that rotate on that helpline number. When they pick up the phone, they don't want to know your name, your company, your NAICS code, city, state, industry, anything. They're simply there to assist you on the front end of an issue versus meeting you in the courtroom. And trust me, if they meet you in the courtroom, more than likely they're not going to be sitting at your table. I can't stress enough, utilize their services. Okay, as I stated, we're not going to go into, the deep weeds on completing the form. I just want to talk about some of those hot areas and give you some of those tips in regards to, once again, the I-9 and E-Verify. So you can complete the I-9 pen to paper. You can also complete it, remember, on our fillable form where the individual can sit down on the computer and fill it out right there on your laptop or on your computer. You still have to be able to provide the employee the instructions. I can't stress that enough. You have to be able to provide the employee the instructions. Now, for those of you that use this fillable form I-9, or maybe use an electronic I-9, you still have to be able to provide them access to those instructions. I'm not telling you have to print them off and have them hard copy for the individual. If you want them on the computer and a link and tell the employee, hey, if you have any questions on what to fill out in each block, hey, hit this link right here and here's the instructions. Once again, you just need to make sure that you're providing those instructions to the employee. Let's talk about the list of acceptable documents. Remember, when you get to the point where you're ready to complete page 2, section 2, and remember, that's your baby as the employer to complete, you should simply be showing the employee this list of acceptable documents and telling them something along these lines. Hey, I need you to provide one document from list A or a combination of a B and C document. Whatever you do, don't tell the employee which documents you would like them to present or what documents others present. Once you show the employee that list, if they were to respond with a question, I don't know about these documents. What does everybody else give? Once again, don't answer that. Your response should be somewhere along the lines of, I can't answer that, but you can provide anything you want. One from list A or a combination of a B and C document. Okay, let's look at each one of these subsections, but let me talk about one of the major takeaways when I give any kind of I-9 presentation. The number one takeaway is if you haven't run off the instructions of the I-9, I highly recommend you do so. Yeah, there's 15 pages of instructions. Does Dave want you to read all the 15 pages? Yeah, I do. But I really want you to hone in on about the first 3 pages or so. Because it's those first couple pages that's going to tell you the rules of what needs to be completed in each block. Not only should you review this, but anybody that has their hands in the I-9 process, within your firm, to include those that maybe they don't touch the I-9, but they run E-Verify cases. Why? Because remember, even with E-Verify, everything starts with the I-9. I can tell you, if you start reading those instructions on the line by line, take a yellow highlighter because you're going to see some things you're going to go, oh, I forgot about that, or oh, I didn't know about that. One of the biggest changes that happened in the I-9, not on this version, but it really started on the previous version that is carried over to this version, is there's various blocks on the I-9 that in the instructions now it states that they must enter something in that particular block or they must enter in A. Such as the middle initial block there on the first line, the other last names used on the first line. On the second line, the apartment number. On the third line, the email address and the employee's telephone number. Yes, it tells you the instructions now. They need to enter something in that block, and if they don't, they must enter in A. Now, you might say, Dave, hey, I wasn't aware of that, or oops, we forgot that. Well, that'll be easy fix, Dave. We'll just go back there and put NA in there. You, the employer, can't do that. Because remember, it's the employee's responsibility to complete the employee information subsection here on page 1. And on the middle of page 1, the employee attestation. So if it's their responsibility to complete those areas, if an item needs to be corrected, you need to bring the employee back in and have them make that correction. Why? If their employment eligibility gets called into question, and maybe an auditor standing there and you, the employer, and the employee, and if somebody else made a correction on those sections that the employee is supposed to fill out, that employee can go, hey, I didn't scratch that out and write that name, or scratch out that date of birth and make a correction, or I didn't write this. That's why you have the employee do that. Let's look at the employee attestation. Make sure that an employee just selects one of those 4 categories. Remember, your responsibility as the employer to the employee completing the subsections is simply this: to ensure that they completely and correctly fill out the I-9. That's your only responsibility in those subsections. They completely and correctly fill out the I-9. You're not validating information that they put in section 1. Where you're validating information is based on the documents they provide you there for section 2. Look at that last statement on the slide. Section 1, that previous slide, the employee information in this attestation area must be completed no later than the first day the employee starts working for pay. This is where I'll have employers go, hold on, Dave, I thought we had 3 days to complete the I-9. We'll talk about section 2 in a second. But here, section 1, the employees section, they have to complete that no later than the first day they start working for pay. But you can complete the I-9 with an employee before they start working for pay. Under what circumstance? As long as you have offered them a job and they've accepted that job, anytime between the date that you've offered them and they accepted and the time that they start working, you can complete the I-9. So yes, you can complete the I-9 before they start working for pay. The key is, have you offered them a job and have they accepted? And the follow-up question I tend to hear is, well, Dave, does that offer have to be in writing or can it be just verbal? As long as you've offered them a job and they've accepted it. Okay. Let's go ahead and go to the Prepare Translator certification. Hey, remember there's 2 new white blocks that are added in on that Prepare Translator certification block. That's new on the I-9 on this current version. Wasn't on any other of the versions. Those 2 blocks down there, the block on the left-hand side states that I, the employee, I didn't use a Prepare Translator. Meaning if I'm the employee, I'm the one that wrote all the information up in section 1. I didn't have anybody write it for me. Maybe my hand was hurt, right? I wrote it myself. I didn't have to, anybody had to translate the I-9. I could read and understand English. So I, the employee, would check that block. If somebody did help prepare the I-9 for me, once again, as an example, maybe that day I was completing the I-9 with the employer, maybe I had broke my hand and it was hard for me to write. I asked the employer, hey, if I tell you what to write in each block, will you write that for me? The employer can do that, but the employer is going to have to fill out this Prepare Translator certification block. So if a preparer or translator was used, they would mark that block there on the right, and then they would fill out the Prepare Translator translation information. Now you see there's an address line here, just like there's an address line up in section 1. Let me go back to that slide. There's an address line here where the employee puts their address. There's an address line at the bottom of the Prepare Translator certification block, if that block is used, if a Prepare Translator is utilized. There's an address block you'll see in section 2, where whoever in your firm or your authorized representative, when they're going to print and sign their name, there's an address line there. Of those 3 address lines, remember the only address line where a P.O. box is acceptable is there at the top of page 1, where the employee puts their address. They can put a P.O. box in there, but a P.O. box is not acceptable in the Prepare Translator certification here, the bottom of page 1, nor is a P.O. box acceptable on page 2. Let's look at page 2 and a couple tips. Remember, if you're filling out the I-9 pen to paper, make sure there at the top that you write the last name, first name, middle initial, and then there's a block off to the right that we've added in the past version or 2 of the I-9. It's called citizenship/immigration status. There's only one of 4 numeric numbers you're going to put in there. Number 1, 2, 3, or 4. How will you know which number to put in there? All you got to do is go back to page 1. In the middle of page 1, the employee attestation, I just took the slide back there. On this example, you see the employee attested being number 3, which is a lawful permanent resident. So all you have to do there in the top right-hand side of page 2 in the citizenship/immigration status block is write the numeric number 3. I'm asked, Well, Dave, if we just write, instead of number 3, if we just write lawful permanent resident, is that fine? The instruction says write the numeric number. Okay. Number 1, 2, 3, or 4. If you do that, there's no questions. You still have list A, B, and C. Depending on which document they present, a list A document or combination of a B and C document. Don't ask for too much documentation. Okay. One from list A or combination of a B and C document. We're receiving questions. Dave, I don't know which document. Where's the document number on a particular document? I don't know what to enter. Or we've run up against a document, maybe like a birth certificate, and the birth certificate doesn't have a number on it. What do we put on it? Well, I can tell you on a birth certificate, it doesn't have a number. Simply write in that block, no document number. Or if you run up against a document such as a permanent resident card or the EAD card, employment authorization document card, and you see different numbers on there and you go, which number do I enter in there? Jot this number down. You're going to see it on our resource page here toward the end, but grab your pen. Here we go. It's our customer service line number. 888-464-4218. Once again, 888-464-4218. You have any question whatsoever on the I-9 or E-Verify, any question whatsoever, pick up the phone, dial our toll-free customer care line number, and you can talk to one of our live representatives Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., your time zone. Why do I say your time zone? Because our call centers are in Buffalo, New York, here in Washington, D.C., Lincoln, Nebraska, and Los Angeles. You see there's that additional information block. What is that? It's pretty much defined in the title. Hey, we've now given you a block if there's some additional information that you would like to have recorded, or as to why you did something, or why you completed a new one and attached the previous I-9 as a historical. There's an area to do so. Okay. The certification block down below. Remember, it's the individual that actually is seeing the documents from the employee. Okay. If Steve is the employer, he's completing the I-9 with me and I'm the employee. We get to the point where we're ready to complete page 2, section 2. Steve shows me the list of documents, acceptable documents, and he says, hey, Dave, I need you to provide one from list A or a combination of a B and C document. If I show him those documents, he's the one that sees the documents, holds the documents. Steve's the one that needs to write the information there in list A or B and C. And then Steve's the one that needs to fill out those blocks below, print his name, sign his name, etc. You can't have one individual see the documents and write the document information in there and have somebody else sign below. You can't do that. Additionally, remember, you need to actually see the original documents. You can't accept somebody taking a picture of a document from home and bringing that picture to you, taking it on their phone, Skyping documents to you. Nope, you need to see the original documents, with one exception. Remember, somebody can show you a certified copy of a birth certificate, and that's acceptable. Look on the left-hand side. Let's talk about that 3-day rule. Still lots of questions. You must complete the I-9 no later than 3 days after they start working for pay. Remember, section 1, though, the employee's information we talked about, they have to complete that no later than the first day. But you, the employer, have up to 3 business days after the employee starts working for pay for you to get those documents from that employee, you to complete there on page 2, and complete it and sign and date it. Still many questions on the 3-day rule. Let's review that. Let's say Steve's firm is open Monday through Friday and closed on Saturday and Sunday. If you started working for pay on Monday, under that circumstance, what would the I-9 need to be complete to be compliant? Remember, the true definition of a complete and compliant I-9 is both section 1 and 2 are completely filled out, signed, and dated. So what day of that week? You know, I'll hear, Dave, that's easy. It's Wednesday. You started Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. No, Dave, it's Thursday. When the actual answer is Thursday. Why? Look on the left-hand side of the screen, the second comment there. Must be completed no later than 3 business days after. 3 business days after the employee starts working for pay. So if I started in that scenario I provided you on Monday, that would be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I gave you the scenario that Steve's firm is closed on Saturday and Sunday. Why? Let's say I started working for pay on Thursday. Given that scenario, when would the I-9 need to be complete to be compliant? That would be Friday, Monday, Tuesday. Remember, it's your business days. I'll receive questions. Well, Dave, we have 6 office locations in our state, or maybe around the nation. Okay, and we work 6 days a week. Our headquarters right down the road, they work 5 days a week. What calendar do we go by? You make that determination. Okay, but whatever determination and policy you set by your work week, make sure that it's uniform. You use that type of calendar in completing all of your I-9s. Uniformity is the key with the I-9. What you do for one, you do for all. Hey, remember, these are permanent resident cards, and we still like to put this out, even though it's been a year now. We started redesigning our permanent resident cards. Yep, we're back to calling them green cards because, yeah, they are green. It's been a year now. For those of you that have worked around documents for years, you probably have become accustomed seeing if an individual shows you a green card where underneath their picture there's a signature. Well, I can tell you under these redesigned permanent resident cards, once again, green cards, you're going to see them not only redesigned in how they look, but there's not going to be a signature underneath their picture now. So if somebody shows you a permanent resident card and there's not a signature under there, don't throw it back at them and say, hey, that's a fraudulent card. Get out of here. Be aware of that. That's why we want to put the slide deck on here. Additionally, if you go to our I-9 website, which is called I-9 Central, you'll see its website address here on the resource page at the end, I-9 Central. On the left-hand side on the home page, click on the Acceptable Documents tab. You'll see all kinds of acceptable copies and examples of documents that may be shown to you for I-9 purposes. Employment authorization cards. Here's another what I call news flash that we've been relaying to the public, in this case, well over a year now. For I-9 purposes, remember, you can't accept any expired documents, right? Now we really need to put an asterisk there. Why? Because some of the EAD cards effective January 17th of 2017, some of those EAD cards have been auto-extended up to 180 days. Yes, the EAD card they may provide you may say it expired this date, but some of those EAD cards have been auto-extended up to 180 days past the expiration date that's on their card. How will you know if that's one of those cards, though? That's where you can go on to I-9 Central. You can look up the fact sheet. Once again, the fact sheet, where you can type up, in that tab, that search tab, when you go to I-9 Central, you can type something in. Type in EAD auto extensions. When you click on that, there'll be a page that'll come up. Click on the second item that's shown. There's the fact sheet on that. If you still don't know if that EAD that individual provided you has been auto extended, pick up the phone, 888-464-4218, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., your time zone. When you talk to our live rep, say, hey, I've got an EAD card here in front of me. The category, as you can see, we have the category circled there on the screen here. The category is this. Is this one of the cards that's been auto-extended? And if it has, how many days has it been auto-extended past the date that's shown on the card? Ensure you do that for those EAD cards that somebody shows you that is expired. Trust me, if they have an expired EAD card and they're showing that to you, more than likely they know it's been auto-extended. But you need to ensure that, in fact, it has been auto-extended, and if so, for how many days? Copying documents, still common question. Dave, do we have to? Do we not have to? Hey, you can read the paragraph that's here on the slide, or you can remember this. You make a copy of every document that's shown to you for I-9 purposes, or you don't make any copies at all. It's one or the other. You know, I've had employers go, well, Dave, hey, we make copies of every permanent resident card and every passport that's shown to us. So we're good to go, aren't we? No, you're not. You're making copies of 2 selected documents. So you need to make a copy of all of them that are shown to you for I-9 purposes or none of them. I've even gone as far as people say, employers have told me, Dave, we didn't make copies, but we're thinking we'd like to make copies now, but we're concerned that somebody's going to holler, hey, discrimination, why are you making copies of my documents? You hired my buddy here 6 months ago, didn't make copies of his. You know, one fix to that, and just a recommendation, you can do a memorandum for file, memorandum for record, company letterhead, dated today. Hey, for purposes of the I-9, our previous policy was we didn't make any copies of any document shown to us for I-9 purposes. But this day moving forward, we will make copies of those documents shown for I-9 purposes. Put it in a file. You have an internal or an external audit, or that gets called into question, you can pull that memorandum out, end of story. You know, one of the most common questions that I receive in regards to Section 3, re-verification and rehires, I will tell you Section 3, which is the bottom of page 2 of the I-9, there were no changes on how to utilize that section, okay? But the most common question that we receive, Dave, which documents do we have to re-verify? We added this slide onto our PowerPoint deck over a year ago. I like to always, just when I bring up this slide, I want your eyes to go right down to the bottom of the slide, right off the bat. Do not re-verify U.S. passports or passport cards when they expire. Do not re-verify any of the permanent resident cards. Yes, that 2-year conditional card, some of you may be aware of, nor the 10-year card. You don't re-verify those. And you don't re-verify any of the List B documents once they expire. Remember, a driver's license is a List B document. You do not re-verify those. Here's an example up top of the slide right here of those that you do. If you still have a question whether you need to re-verify a document or not, and you're not sure, go on I-9 Central. You're still not sure, what are you going to do? Aren't you tired of me telling you about this phone number? 888-464-4218. Utilize that as much as can be. How long do you retain the I-9? I'll still hear from employers, Dave, we only have to keep them for 3 years and then we shred them, right? No. If you have hired an individual after November 6, 1986, anytime after November 6, 1986, and they're still working for you, you need to have an I-9 on file for them. Yeah, if you hired me in 1995, here it is, been what, 23 years later? Yeah, you have to have an I-9 on file for me. But what do you do with the I-9s? How long do you have to keep them once the employee's no longer with you? Meaning they quit or you fired them. That's where this slide comes into play. Retention. You need to retain the I-9, as the slide states here, either 3 years after the date you hired an employee or 1 year after the date employment terminates, whichever is latter. I know that's a mouthful. Look at the example below. Let's say Steve hired John on November 1st, 2014. But then John left the company on July 5th, 2016. So how long do you retain the I-9 now? So Steve goes, he's in the office. He pulls John's I-9 out. He looks there on page 2, the date that John started working for pay. It was November 1st, 2014. Steve added 3 years to that date, put that date to the side. He then takes the date that John left the company, which in this case was July 5th, 2016. Steve adds 1 year to that date, put that date to the side. Which of those two dates are latter? In this example, as the slide says, November 1st, 2017. That's how long Steve needs to retain the I-9. You retain it anywhere you want. We don't tell you where to retain it. What do you do with the I-9 after that retention date is come and gone? That's your business as well. You want to get rid of it, shred it, whatever you want to do, that's fine. You just need to keep that I-9 up to that retention date. Let's look at some of E-Verify before we jump into those resources, and then we'll get to your questions. Remember, E-Verify literally just went through a modernization, which just went live about 2 weeks ago. Yeah, it was back right at the end of April. One of the last days in April. Here's just some of your reminders. In regards to the I-9, since you're enrolled in E-Verify, we won't go over these, but these are good items right here just to remind. I do want to highlight a couple of them. Look at the third one there. If the employee puts the email address on the I-9, you have to enter it into E-Verify. Remember that since you're enrolled in E-Verify, they have to enter the Social Security number on the I-9. Why? Because that's one of the data fields you're going to run in E-Verify, correct? I'm going to show you some screenshots and just point out a couple things. And here's some of the new screenshots on this new look for E-Verify, its modernization. Look at the highlights you see on each one of those slides. Yeah, some of these highlights in regards to E-Verify's modernization, easier data entry. The screen auto scrolls down. It's not you complete one page in I-9 and then hit continue, it goes to another page, hit continue, another page. You can just scroll up and down. Okay. There's a progress bar you see on the left, kind of tells you where you are in the process of running an E-Verify case. Look here now with the Social Security number field. Remember, you've got to put that field in there, and the email address. You either have to enter the email address that the employee put on the I-9, but if they didn't put an email address on the I-9, now there's a block there where you check off no email address is provided. It's not going to allow you to enter information on beyond that until you've either entered their email address that they entered on the I-9 or you click on that button. So you see some of these items where it's basically trying to help not only you, the employer, but it'll speed up your process of actually getting the information loaded and making sure you're not missing something. You'll see one of the additional items here. Once you click on the citizenship status that the individual attested to being, remember on page 1, middle page 1? Then you can click on which documents they presented. There's a drop down there that'll kind of correlate, hey, if they state they're attested to this and they're going to provide this type of document, these are the documents that should be available for that citizenship status that they selected. So it's there to assist you. Once again, for some reason, if you get stuck, you don't know exactly what to do. Yes, you can go to the website or you can pick up the phone, 888-464-4218. So you see some of the additional items that we have here to basically assist you. Here's just an example where, depending on the document that you had selected, one of the items right above the status of the card that they presented, see, it gives you an example right there of what that card looks like. Kind of shows you, hey, here's where the document number is. This is where you would enter that number into E-Verify. That kind of assists the employers now of knowing, hey, where's that document number? Where do I find that? So you'll see some of those additional tools here as well. This just shows you right here when you're entering those document numbers, if you haven't entered a complete number. You'll see where it's come up red. Hey, it must be exactly 9 digits. Exact. So it's catching. It's not going to allow you just to put a couple letters and maybe 5 or 6 numbers in there and let you continue on. It's going to catch that. So you see some of these additional functions, some of these additional enhancements that's helping you to ensure that you are entering the information completely, and as you make sure that you go back to the I-9 and look at that a little bit more closer. Here is just simply the screen showing that once you run an individual through, that the employee is authorized. They're authorized to work. And remember, you're going to get this authorized screen when you run them through E-Verify 98.8% of the time. I think it's almost 98.9% now. Okay. That's not, I'm not telling you that to go, hey, look how good E-Verify is 98.9% of the time. What we're telling you is 98.9% of the time, the information that the employee placed on the I-9, the documents that they presented you, and that you transfer that data onto the I-9, then you ran it into E-Verify, loaded into E-Verify, 98.9% of the time it's matching what's in the government databases. Okay. Tentative non-confirmation. This is when, remember, tentative non-confirmation is simply break down the long words. We call it a TNC. But what we're telling you is tentatively, the employee's not confirmed to work. Tentatively. We've broken down to the language in what we call plain language to help employers understand a little bit more on what do I do if that information is not matched in the government database? What's my next steps? Well, we've broken them right down there, your next steps. We tell you exactly what to do. You download that further action notice. You follow along just with each one of the screens. If you have any questions, go into our manual, go onto our website, call our call center, okay? That'll walk you right through. Here's the new further action notice. You see, it's probably, we've just changed some of the wording, reduced some of the words down now. Remember, it still self-populates information for you. Here's an example of a TNC from DHS, okay, where you still bring the employee in privately, review that with them. The employee's going to check off whether they wish to take action or not. But here is a new further action notice that we've developed, which is a combination of, let's say when you load the information into E-Verify, it's not matching the information at not only SSA, but it's also not matching it at DHS. Instead of sending you two separate TNCs in the E-Verify, you could combine it into one. So that is a new tentative non-confirmation further action notice that you could receive on an employee, okay? Here's the new referral. If the individual decides, yes, I want to contest that, I want to go address that issue from either SSA or DHS, that's just what the new referral looks like. Breaks it down. It's a little bit more simpler, okay? The case alert page, this is still the home page for the live E-Verify system. You still have your case updates. That's where you keep up with any case that has a new update. We've just put some additional information in here. Periodically, you're going to, once you run a case through E-Verify, if it comes back as a TNC, the individual says, yeah, I want to address that issue. You refer them to that agency. Remember, all you need to do is periodically go back into E-Verify and you're looking for a new case update. And you see on this slide right here, this is a good slide that you might want to run off. Okay, you're going to have access to that. You see the actual pages and the sections in our E-Verify manual where you can look up each one of those type of responses to look into more detail. What does that actually mean? Hey, here's our employer hotline number. Have you heard me mention that throughout today's session? I can't stress that enough. 888-464-4218. Remember, any questions you have whatsoever on the I-9 and the E-Verify. You see our employee hotline number and our email address. Feel free to utilize those as much as possible. And ladies and gentlemen, a basic disclaimer. This is simply meant as an informational and an instructional session based on some of the hot tips, some of the areas that I received the most questions on. Some of the areas that individuals go, Dave, that's not what I understood, or that's not what somebody else told me, or I misunderstood that. So we want to cover a lot of those areas, and hopefully that helped you out. But once again, for the rest of the session, I'm going to turn this back over to Steve. And Steve's going to have some information, and then we'll jump into any of the questions that you have. So feel free to go ahead and send those in. Steve, back to you.
Thank you, Dave. We'll now take our viewers' questions for the remainder of the time. If you had not had a chance to ask a question via the chat box, please feel free to do so now. So I'm going to turn it over to Duana Maxey of AccuSource for the question and answer session. Duana.
Thank you, Steve. So Dave, the first question that we have is, if I am the employer and I provide translation services along with signing the employer attestation, do I have to sign the preparer section?
If you are assisting, that's a great question. If the employee cannot read the English, okay, and can't understand it, and you are translating that information, then yes, you're going to fill out that bottom prepare translation, but you can also be the individual that completes section 2 as well. Okay. And that's a great question also in regards to translation, where we want to use, and let me define that a little bit more. When we say that's a preparer translator section there, when we say translation, we're talking translation of language. I've been asked, Dave, you know, I'm not translating language. We have an individual that can read and understand English, but they have a question as to what to put in that block, or they don't quite understand what the instructions are telling them to do. So I'll read the instructions with them and I give them a little bit of guidance. Does that make me a translator? No, it does not. Okay. So hopefully that answers that question, Dewana. So back to you.
So the second question that we had, Dave, was for remote employees out of state, how can I examine the docs? Is photo via text acceptable?
And that's a great question, and it really starts with the I-9. We have, first of all, for those remote hires, no, you can't have them take a picture or Skype those documents. For remote hires, what we tell employers, and that's when we do our full in-depth I-9 presentation, on those remote hires, we tell employers that you can utilize anyone to complete Section 2 on your behalf. Okay? Anybody can complete Section 2. So let's just say an example. Let's just say Dewana's in South Carolina, okay? And she's going to start an office up here in D.C. And she calls and offers me a job, and I accept the job. But Dewana says, hey, Dave, we're not going to fly you down here to South Carolina. We're just going to mail your onboarding packet up to you. And maybe within that packet is the I-9. Dewana can have me go to whomever she would like to complete Section 2 on her behalf. It could be a friend, a family member, maybe a previous employee that Dewana worked with. She may say, Dave, I want you to go to a bank, a librarian, a notary, to an attorney, whoever can complete Section 2 on your behalf. But here's the key. If you have someone else complete Section 2 on your behalf, they're doing so as your responsible agent. They're doing so on behalf of your firm. Thus, you're liable for any errors that that individual commits. So, yes, you can have someone complete Section 2 for you on your behalf for that remote employee, but you need to make sure they know what they're doing, okay? So, follow-on question we generally receive with that, Dewana, is, well, Dave, then based on that, does USCIS provide a list of companies or individuals that you recommend that handle remote hires I-9s around the country? No, we can't, back anybody in particular. But Google's a great thing, isn't it? Trust me, I've even went on Google and say, hey, companies that do I-9s for remote hires. There's hundreds out there, okay? But just note that you cannot complete the I-9 over the phone or taking pictures of those documents for that remote hire, okay? I know that's a long, drawn-out answer, Dewana, but I want to give the big picture on that, okay? So back to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dave. The next question that we have is, do we keep copies of List A documents only, or List A and List B if we are doing E-Verify?
That's great. And once again, let's go into a little bit of detail on that, okay? Let's set E-Verify aside, but I've got your question. We're going to come back to that, okay? Set E-Verify aside. So in regards to copying documents, in regards to the I-9, remember, you either make a copy of every document or you don't make any copies at all, one or the other, okay? Now let's enter E-Verify into the equation. Once you enroll in E-Verify, as it's outlined in the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding that you sign, the electronic sign when you enroll in E-Verify, it tells you in that MOU that you must make a copy of any one of these 4 List A documents. Here's the 4 documents. We call them the photo matching documents. You must make a copy of a U.S. passport, a U.S. passport card, a permanent resident card, or the EAD card, okay? Any one of those 4 you must make a copy of, okay? Now, this is where I'll get a follow-up question from time to time. Dave, our standard policy was we didn't make any copies of any documents for the I-9. That's our standard policy. Now we've enrolled in E-Verify. And E-Verify states we must make a copy of any one of those 4 documents. Once again, U.S. passport, passport card, permanent resident card, EAD card. Dave, if we only make copies of those 4 photo matching documents as it's outlined that we have to in the MOU with E-Verify, but we don't make copies of any others. Are we discriminating? Are we good to go? Yeah, you're good to go. Why? Because your standard policy is you don't make any copies of any documents. But now you've enrolled in E-Verify, and to follow the rules and regulations of E-Verify, you must make a copy of those 4. So if you're making a copy of just any one of those 4 that are shown to you, but nothing else, you're good to go. Okay. So with that, back to you, Dewan.
Thank you, Dave. The next question is, I hire 50 people a year on average. I am embarrassed to say I have never used E-Verify. I simply have the I-9 filled out within 72 hours of hire and file it in a fireproof file cabinet in our personnel files. Do I have to use E-Verify?
That's another great question. And sorry, these questions aren't just as simply yes or no. I like to give the big picture, okay? Number one, let me say this about E-Verify. E-Verify is a voluntary program, period. Here's all the asterisks, okay? Number one, unless you are a federal contractor and you've been awarded a federal contract that within that contract, it has what's called the FAR E-Verify clause. It's a clause that's inserted in that contract that as a condition of that contract being awarded to you, you must enroll and use E-Verify. That's one of the stipulations. Another is, there's 20 states throughout the U.S. that have enacted legislation within their own state mandating the use of E-Verify in some form or fashion within their state. Why do I say in some form or fashion? Of those 20 states, there's some states that have basically their law states all employers must use E-Verify, such as Arizona, Mississippi, South Carolina. There's some states that state all employers must use E-Verify if you have 5 or more employees. Some states, their law states, hey, only state agencies or public or private contractors, okay? So E-Verify is a voluntary program unless you're a federal contractor that's been awarded that contract that has the clause in it, or if you're one of those 20 states that have enacted the legislation. How will you know what the legislation is for your specific city? Google's a great thing, isn't it? Hey, E-Verify law in Indiana, E-Verify law in South Carolina. Also, you need to be aware of that because you might be an employer in one state, but you oversee employees or maybe some offices in some other states. You need to know what the E-Verify law is for that specific state, okay? Because each state writes their own law in regards to mandated use of E-Verify. All right. Once again, bigger question, bigger answer there, Dewana, but hopefully I'm giving the big picture answer. So back to you.
No, we appreciate the detail, Dave. Thank you. The next question that we have is, what happens when you audit and determine missing documents for the I-9 from years prior to your employment?
Let's see. So if your policy is, well, first of all, it goes back to what is your company's policy? If your policy is that you make copies of documents and you audit and you realize, hey, I've got about 70 I-9s here, don't have the copies. So you have a couple options there. One option is you can go back to the employee and say, hey, we did an audit. See, you provided this document, that document. We didn't make a copy. Can I see that document? Make a copy. Okay, that's easy enough. You might say, well, Dave, that sounds fine, but this employee was 20 years ago, and he showed his his or her driver's license, and now it's expired. They got a new one. So, what do we do with that? Well, you can't make a copy of what's not there, right? All right. Now, what I recommend you do is simply, if you've done all your due diligence in trying to make copies of those documents from those that you're missing, then do a memorandum for file, memorandum for record. Hey, we did an audit on our I-9s. We realized although we make copies of all the documents, we are missing various documents, from these I-9s. We've done our due diligence. We've made copies where we can. And then file that. I'm not telling you that if you had an external or even an internal audit that, whoever inspects you wouldn't write you up for that, but at least what does it show the auditors? That number one, you're trying to do the right thing. You've identified a problem and you've tried to fix it as much as you can to your ability or, the availability of those documents, okay? So once again, a little bit more detailed answer, and hopefully that's addressed that. Back to you, Dewana.
Okay, Dave, thank you. The next question is, I am a member of a church and I believe they do not fill out I-9 forms. Do I have to advise them to go back and fill out I-9 forms for all employees? All were hired after 86.
Very good question. And, that is a common question that we will receive. Dave, did these individuals, have to complete the I-9, do these? And if you open up the M274 handbook, it's titled that's our handbook on how to complete the I-9, the guidance to employers. One of the first paragraphs you're going to see on one of the first pages is going to tell you who needs to complete an I-9. And it's basically this: anybody that receives any type of remuneration for their work, you have to complete an I-9 on file. That doesn't mean just those employees, those individuals that are receiving pay, for their work. They might be receiving free room and board. They might be receiving stocks within a company. They might be if they're receiving something for their services for the work, then you need to complete an I-9. So in that instance, if individuals are receiving some type of remuneration for that, for their work, then yes, you would have to have them go back and complete an I-9. Now, let me tell you this. Let's say in that example that you have employees that have been working there at the church for 7, 8 years, okay, or maybe even longer, and there's an I-9 not on file. You need to have that the employee complete the I-9. When they fill out section 1, they date it today, okay? They don't backdate it to when they started 7 years ago, okay? When that employee shows the employer list A or B and C document, and the employer fills out section 2, and they're in the certification block, midway page 2, where they print their name and sign their name, the date that they are going to enter is like today's date or whatever date the employee showed them that document, okay? But they're in that about middle of page 2, where it states the date that they certify they began working for pay. That's where the employer is going to put the real date that the employer started working for pay, whether it be 5, 7, 10, 15 years ago. Alrighty. Now, if you're following me here, you might say, and that is the correct way to fill out an I-9 for somebody you didn't have one on, or you were missing an I-9 on an individual, okay? Now, if you're following me here, you might say, no, hold on, Dave. If we go back and have those I-9s completed on those individuals that we should have done one on, but we didn't, and if we were to get audited, it's going to show that those employees started working for pay, 5, 7, 10 years ago, but we just completed the I-9 today. That's more than 3 business days after they started working for pay that we completed the I-9. We're going to get written up for that. Yes, you will. But the worst thing you can do on an I-9 is backdate it. You backdate the I-9, you get caught, you're in serious trouble. I mean, that could be some serious money, okay? Because remember, these auditors do this for a living. They know all the tricks to the trade. And in this scenario right here, it would be an easy one for them to catch. Why? Because remember, this I-9, it's only been in existence for what, about 1.5 years now, if that. So whatever you do, don't backdate an I-9, okay? Once again, detailed answer. Hopefully that assists that individual as well. Duana, back to you.
Dave, this will be the last question. The final question is, if we have to complete Section 3 re-verification, then do we have to run them through E-Verify again?
No. Great question. And this is pretty much a simple answer. Once you've run them through E-Verify, and they've come back, employment authorized, or if they received a TNC and then they worked it out, they're employment authorized. Just because you have to go back and complete Section 3, re-verify a document, you do not run them through E-Verify again, okay? Boy, that was a short answer. Back to you, Duana.
Thank you, Dave. Steve?
All right. Dave, thanks so much for the presentation today and the responses to the questions.